everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining this session today. A little bit about me before we get stuck in. My name is Bea, and I'm the Operations Manager for GAIN, which is a group for autism, investment, insurance, and neurodiversity. I have ADHD, and I was formally diagnosed last year after just over 3 years on NHS waiting lists. As a result of my ADHD, I tend to waffle a little bit, so I make an adjustment for myself, which is scripting my training sessions. This helps me keep myself on track, not miss out any key information, and most importantly means that everybody finishes on time. There's a lot of ground to cover today and a lot of information on slides. We will be sending around the slides to you all at the end of the session. We'll also be recording this presentation, but we'll be stopping the recording at the end for Q&A. I will take pauses at points in this presentation for any questions too. So welcome to Neurodiversity 101. In this session, we are going to understand the terms used to describe neurodiversity. We will learn about common strengths and support needs of neurodivergent people. We'll seek to understand what the spectrum and spiky profile mean. We will explore the business case for neurodiversity, and we'll seek to understand the impact the lack of inclusion has on neurodivergent individuals at work. So we're going to start, if my slides will change, with a short visualization exercise. Please close your eyes and try to visualize a rotating red sphere or a ball for me, please. I'll give you a couple of seconds just to do that. Okay, so either physically raising your hands if you want to, or using the Teams chat feature. Please raise your hand if you weren't able to visualize anything at all. Okay, a few hands going up. Please raise your hand if you could see a vague shape or an outline, but not any detail. Okay, a couple more hands going up, brilliant. So how about anyone who could see the shape, but no colour? Please raise your hand. Couple more going up. Big variety going on. Okay, brilliant. And finally, who could see details and could anybody see it move? Huge variety. That's interesting. Okay, so visualization is a key skill ranging from aphantasia, which is the absence of mental imagery, so everyone who couldn't see anything at all, to highly detailed live visual mapping. With the example of visualization skills, let's ask ourselves how many talented architects have significant skill in visualizing. Does having this skill actually impact the quality of their design work, or does their work come to life through other talents and skills? Consider the fact that architects often use 3D design software to bring their projects to life too. If we expected architects to be able to see 3D moving images in their mind, and we interviewed, tested, and assessed candidates on this expectation, how many capable people would we lose from the talent pool? This exercise seeks to remind us that we all think differently, and it gets us thinking about how certain ways of doing things might unintentionally make us lose out on specific methods and talents that could help us in our day-to-day work. We can consider how might being neurodivergent or neurotypical affect how two people approach the same task? Would different ways of thinking and working add quality to the work? How might, would someone be able to produce higher quality work or perform better with access to different tools, for instance, spelling and grammar check or scheduling assistant software? How might we be able to combine different ways of thinking and working to be more efficient or more detailed? And finally, are we missing out on neurodivergent talent through a recruitment process that is designed for neurotypical candidates? Much to think about. But for now, let's get stuck in with some learning. I've got some basic terminology for you all. First, we've got neurotypical, or the slide's a little bit topsy-turvy, but neurotypical is a term for an individual who thinks, perceives, and behaves in ways that are considered the norm by the general population. And we've got neurodivergent on the other side on the right here. This is the term for when someone's brain processes, learns, and or behaves differently from what is considered typical. Neurotype, over on the left, my apologies for the slide, this refers to a type of mind in terms of how a person interprets and responds to social cues, learning, and work environments. Autism is one neurotype, ADHD is another, and dyslexia is another one. And then spectrum down in the bottom right here. This does not mean that everyone is a little bit neurodivergent. And it also doesn't mean that a neurodivergent person sits on a linear scale and could be a little bit neurodivergent or very neurodivergent. What the spectrum does mean, though, is that any one neurodivergent person can have a unique spectrum of traits within their neurotype. An example is two autistic people might have different triggers around touch. One of them might be touch sensitive. They might not like being touched by another person, or maybe they're irritated by a certain type of fabric or a clothing label. And the other autistic person might be sensory seeking and use tools like weighted blankets or sensory touch fidget toys as a way to regulate themselves. Both are autistic and have unique traits related to their autism. So, what is the difference between the terms neurodivergent and neurodiverse or neurodiversity? You may have heard the terms neurodiversity and neurodivergent be used interchangeably, but they don't quite mean the exact same thing. Neurodivergent refers to someone with a specific neurotype, so an autistic person, someone with ADHD, and a dyslexic person. These people would all be neurodivergent. Neurodiversity, on the other hand, is the umbrella term that includes everyone, including neurotypical people. This is the term that acknowledges that everyone's brains work differently, and it explores that there is no such thing as a normal mind. When we're talking to or about neurodivergent people, should we use person-first language or identity-first language? In academic and medical fields, person-first language is used more often. They would say a person with autism or a person with dyslexia. But most neurodivergent people themselves tend to use identity-first language. They would say an autistic person, an ADHD, or a dyslexic person. This is because a neurotype isn't something that you have, it's something that's part of you, it's part of your identity, and there's no version of yourself without it. Of course, this isn't a universal feeling and everyone is different. If someone expresses that they have a preference, then of course this should be respected. I'm going to pause quickly just for any questions. Is everything all right? Does anyone need anything clarified? See a little thumbs up there. So, oh, there's a hand up. It's gone to a thumbs up. Okay, I will continue. If my slides would let me. There we go. So a spiky profile is a concept looking at different skills, and it further demonstrates that neurodiversity is a spectrum. All people have some areas that they are more skilled in than others. We all have areas of strength and areas where we need support. For a neurotypical person, most skills tend to be within a consistent range. A chart mapping their skills would show a flatter line, maybe with some variation, creating some peaks and valleys. For neurodivergent individuals, skill levels and support needs may vary more significantly, even in interconnected skills. If charted on a graph, the resulting line is spiky. So here we can see the blue lines creating a much more spiky profile here, and then this yellow line, a neurotypical person. Some variation, but overall a little bit flatter. On the screen is an example of a skills profile from a GAIN team member. This profile was created by a company called Genius Within. Here we can see that this individual's skills sit at different levels. Some of them, like literacy, up here, sits above that normal range. Sits above that typical range, whereas another skill, non-verbal memory, which is down here, sits below the typical range. Now, if you take one thing away from today's session, let it be that neurodiversity is a spectrum and everyone is different in their strengths, in their support needs, and in their presentations. It's important to remember that neurodivergent strengths are not universal. Not every single autistic person has hyperempathy and a strong sense of justice and great attention to detail. And not every person with dyslexia is a skilled leader and a great storyteller and skilled at visual thinking. Rather, it's simply that these strengths that we talk about, and we'll go into more detail in a minute, are particularly common among these certain neurotypes. Why is neuroinclusion good for business? The financial industries, specifically insurance, are facing a growing talent shortage, and the insurance industry in particular could lose 400,000 people by attrition between 2023 and 2026. Over a quarter of people working in the insurance market are over the age of 50, meaning that they will reach or be coming up to a retirement age over the next 10 to 15 years. Addressing talent gaps in our industry is crucial for us to innovate and meet evolving customer expectations. Each business will have differing talent gaps, but areas like risk management, data analytics, technology, and fundamental insurance skills like actuarial and claims roles seem to be areas where there are consistent gaps. When we cross-examine what skills are needed in these roles, where there are growing talent gaps, we'll find that neurodivergent workers might naturally be very well suited. For example, autistic people tend to be very detail-orientated. They have pattern recognition skills and systematic logical approaches, meaning that they could be very well suited to actuarial, claims, or underwriting roles. Those with ADHD could enter hyperfocus and be very productive. They tend to work very well under pressure and can bring forward innovative solutions, meaning that actuarial or claims roles could be a great fit. And finally, dyslexic individuals tend to have good storytelling and verbal communication skills. They can be strong leaders and have great big picture thinking. Underwriting roles could be a great match for them. In 2015, JP Morgan Chase launched their Autism at Work program pilot. They've been running the program ever since. The findings of the original pilot and the ongoing program have been very supportive of the inclusion of neurodivergent talent. The pilot found that after 6 months of employment, autistic employees were equal in quality to their neurotypical peers, who had been employed for significantly longer. It was also found that these autistic employees were 48% faster and 92% more productive. The pilot also boasted a 99% retention rate. By fostering neuro-inclusive workplaces, we can better appeal to neurodiverse talent, both new to the industry and returning to it, and help fill those talent gaps. I'm going to pause again if anyone does have any questions. And I'm going to take that silence as a no, and that is okay. Next, we'll move on. So what are these common strengths that we're talking about today? So autistic people may be very detail-orientated. They may have excellent concentration skills as well. Autistic people may also have a strong sense of right and wrong, and in turn, a strong sense of justice. They also may be very honest individuals because of that strong sense of right and wrong. Autistic people may have very good, strong memories too. Dyslexic individuals can have excellent visual thinking skills. They can be very creative and have good verbal communication and storytelling skills. People with Down syndrome often have good visual skills. They may be visual learners and have strong visual memory. People with Down syndrome can also be highly empathetic and dependable individuals. They may have visionary, big picture thinking. Another common strength is that people with Down syndrome can be very technologically adept. People with ADHD tend to be very creative and passionate individuals. Some ADHDers can multitask very easily. And often ADHDers can enter intense, prolonged periods of focus and productivity. I mentioned this before. This is known as hyperfocus. This happens when they are working with a subject that interests them, or when there's strong external motivation or pressure to complete a task, like a looming deadline. ADHDers may be able to laterally think very easily. This is another word for out-of-the-box thinking. They also might be very creative problem solvers. Individuals with Tourette's syndrome, like ADHDers, can enter hyperfocus. They also may be very creative individuals with excellent observational skills and innovative thinking. And finally, dyspraxic individuals can be highly empathetic with strong verbal and communication skills. These individuals can also be very creative and also very honest. In 2021, an Office of National Statistics survey looking at outcomes for disabled people in the UK found that only 53.5% of disabled people aged 16 to 24 were employed in the UK, compared with 81.6% of non-disabled people in the same age group. Less than 30% of autistic people aged 16 to 24 were employed, which is the second lowest of any disability group. The survey report didn't explicitly list out other neurotypes, but it did note that 26% of people with learning disabilities are employed, 30% of people with mental illnesses are employed, and 54% of people falling into a broad other disabilities group are employed. In the graph on the screen, you'll notice that there are 3 coloured dots next to each disability. The coloured dots represent an estimated range with lower and upper error margins for a UK-wide estimate based on the sample size from the ONS study. In another 2019 survey, the Vulnerable Experiences study, it was found that a staggering 73% of 386 autistic people surveyed said that they left a job because they were unable to deal with the work environment or the demands. It is noted that the control group here is smaller, with 260 non-autistic participants, but the percentage of those who answered this question saying, yes, I left a job for this reason, is comparatively smaller at 32%. Other statistics from this study indicate that autistic people are more likely to be signed off from work for longer periods of time due to poor mental health. They are more likely to be unemployed and seeking work for at least a year, and they are more likely to leave a job due to being treated badly by colleagues. GAIN carries out a neurodivergent experiences survey every year. In 2024, we asked our community about their experiences with salary, career progression, and disciplinary measures. We found that there were significant differences in experiences of neurodivergent and neurotypical individuals. Specifically, reported salaries were higher for neurotypical people than neurodivergent people. Neurodivergent people were promoted less often than neurotypical people. Neurodivergent people experienced more disciplinaries more often, and anecdotal reports frequently noted that neurodivergent traits were being marked as performance issues. In 2024, Zurich carried out a one-poll survey of 1,000 neurodivergent adults in the UK and found that half of neurodivergent adults had been discriminated against when looking for a role, with 31% saying their application was not taken further after they had disclosed their neurodiversity. 21% of respondents reported that they were laughed at. 27% received comments about their abilities or never heard back from a recruiter at all. 54% of respondents believe that recruitment processes are designed to weed out neurodivergent candidates. And only 17% of neurodivergent adults who were surveyed were offered adjustments without prompt when they interviewed for a role. So, the statistics are a little bleak, to say the least, but solutions are easier than we think. A key step in working towards more neuro-inclusive workplaces is awareness and understanding of the different neurotypes, the common challenges and strengths, and how to provide support to colleagues. Support needs, as we know, will vary from person to person, but some common support needs that we need to be aware of include social needs. Neurodivergent people may have difficulties with differing communication styles, and they may prefer more direct and to-the-point ways of communicating. Neurodivergent people may also need to communicate via a certain method, like written or spoken, due to difficulties with information processing. Ask culture, which is a direct method of stating needs, is usually a more effective way to communicate rather than guess culture, which is where we opt to hint towards needs in the hope that someone offers help. So, for example, can you help me work out this calculation is asking, and saying, I just can't seem to work out this calculation is guessing. Someone who struggles with social cues and or works best with a direct, to-the-point communication style might not pick up on those subtle hints of guess culture. Interpretations of social cues may also be a struggle. Eye contact can be uncomfortable and body language might be difficult for some neurodivergent people to read. Next, we have predictability and control. Some neurodivergent people work best in environments where there is reasonable predictability and control, so regular hot desking might be quite a challenge. Unpredictable and last-minute changes to hybrid working schedules can also be a big challenge. Another challenge could be unpredictable or sudden last-minute deadlines. Some sensory challenges. Sensory elements of an office space can sometimes be challenging for neurodivergent people. Different neurodivergent people will have different levels of sensitivity and triggers when it comes to sensory needs. Things like texture, temperature, taste, smell, and sound can all contribute to sensory overwhelm. It's also important to consider how sensory elements can lead to distraction. For example, someone with ADHD might not experience sensory overwhelm per se, but they may struggle to focus in a very noisy environment. Some neurodivergent people may need to move around more than what is expected to, either through fidgeting or physically getting up and walking around. Some neurodivergent people may have affected vestibular sense. This is a sense of balance and spatial awareness. Interoception is the ability to notice and read your own body signals, like thirst, hunger, and pain, the need to go to the toilet. If someone is in hyperfocus, it's not completely unheard of that they may just completely ignore body cues so that they don't break out of that intense focus. Some neurodivergent people may need additional support tools to help them with a reduced sense of interoception, like smartwatches and alarms to remind them to address their body's needs. In terms of cultural stuff, some neurodivergent people may struggle with social functions. and perceived expectations to attend office parties and drinks. There may be difficulties understanding exactly what business casual is, for example, or the unspoken rules or expectations about unofficial overtime or always-on culture. With time, neurodivergent people can have a number of different difficulties related to time, including struggling to sense how much time a task will take to complete and a sense of how much time has passed. This is also known as time blindness. Things like meetings or training sessions overrunning can contribute to anxiety with predictability. Another stressor could be not having adequate time to prepare for meetings. Long meetings or focus periods can be very draining for some neurodivergent people. Some neurodivergent people may need more time than expected to process information and come up with questions to help their understanding too. And finally, technical skills. Different neurotypes, for example, dyslexia, have official symptoms that center around technical skills. Many neurodivergent people may struggle with numeracy, language, written communication, visual learning, auditory learning, and kinesthetic learning. This is learning by doing. On the other hand, some neurodivergent people may excel in some technical skills. As we've learned, everyone is an individual and neurodiversity is a spectrum. We can make adjustments for these support needs in a number of ways, and you might find that making small changes can make a huge difference. We can give clear, direct instructions and opt for communicating our needs by asking rather than guessing. We can also bullet point our lists to help break up text and make information easier to process. We can ask about assigned desks in some parts of the office, if not throughout the office. We can keep a predictable routine for employees who hybrid work or opt for remote working as standard. We can allow employees to avoid busy commutes during rush hour by changing their start and finish times. We can keep meetings to 45 minutes if we notice that some colleagues are starting to disengage during long meetings. During video meetings, we can make cameras being on optional. We can give explicit guidance about expectations around dress code and overtime. We can allow the use of noise-cancelling headphones, the use of quiet spaces in the office, fidget toys and standing desks, wobble chairs. All of these can be immensely helpful for people who have differing sensory needs. We can also help those with differing sensory needs even further by allowing them to work from home. We can prepare meeting agendas in advance and distribute these in plenty of time for colleagues to be able to read and prepare notes and slides. We can also allow colleagues to have adequate information processing time. This can be really helpful, and remember that it might take some people longer than expected to process information and then ask follow-up questions. Finally, we can also integrate different software to help with technical skills, such as AI minute takers, spelling and grammar checkers, speech to text, and we can also use voice notes and subtitles. In the workplace, universal design is the action of designing our offices and company culture to be as inclusive to as many groups as possible. It's supported by a concept called the curb-cut effect. Angela Glover-Blackwell described the curb-cut effect, in 2017, saying that the cut curb in pavements, which was initially designed to improve accessibility for wheelchair users, ended up being incredibly useful for a lot more groups. Parents pushing buggies, visually impaired people, people carrying large or bulky items are just a few examples of other people who have benefited from a cut curb. This real-life example demonstrates that adjustments designed for a particular group quite often positively impact many, if not all others. So, how could we apply the cut curb effect to the workplace? This is Hannah. Hannah is autistic and dyslexic. She experiences sensory overwhelm in open-plan offices and struggles with commuting during rush hour. She finds it difficult to pull relevant information out of really long paragraphs of text and learns more effectively through verbal rather than written instruction. To help Hannah, we could approve a set of individual adjustments specifically for her, like adjusted start and finish times so that she can avoid a rush hour, and purchasing text-to-speech and an AI note taker to help her pull out information more effectively. Or we could normalise headphone use for all employees. We could offer flexible and remote working as standard. We could provide training materials produced in video and written format. We could normalise functional email subject lines, such as putting information only or action required in the email subject. We could give a top-line summary about what the email is about and put bullet-pointed actions at the top of the email body so it's easier to pull out that information. This universal design approach helps Hannah, but goes on to help more employees who may be struggling with similar issues. It streamlines the formal adjustments process by having normalised and available strategies that anyone can use without seeking special permission. It gives more agency to employees to implement strategies into their own work life and allows them to experiment with what works and what doesn't independently. And that brings us to the end of our session today. I will stop the recording now and open the floor to anyone who might have any questions. But before I do that, there is a QR code on the screen if you would like to leave me some feedback. Any and all feedback is welcome, and it helps us shape our sessions.